Welcome to another episode of Enlightenment Through Understanding and Wisdom show with your host, Jacob Strong. How's everybody doing today? I know I went like 2 weeks without making any podcasts, and here I am on this weekend making two podcasts. Kind of interesting. Well, one of the things that I wanted to discuss today is there's kind of like the new age hippie movement of like this chakra and you know, like energy and frequency and all of that. At a scientific level, can we substantiate or prove the existence of a fifth dimension or another dimensional being? Now, I believe that we can. I believe that we can not only substantiate and prove, but we can elevate um, those that want to become aware. Now, we have to understand that human beings cannot change. I know I'm using that word that you can't change, but it's true. Um, a person who has chosen to incarnate into this dimension or who has been sent here into this dimension um, cannot change who they are. Um, Darkness cannot change into light. Light cannot change into darkness. Light can penetrate the dark, which then makes you think that the dark can become light. But it really doesn't. Again, as most of you know, I'm an HVAC technician, and you know, it's really quite an ironic thing when you sit and you think about it, because as an HVAC technician, you understand that an air conditioning system does not change the the temperature of the air. It doesn't at a molecular structure, it does not change anything. It does change the temperature of the air, but it doesn't change anything to do with the atmosphere or the air itself. What an air conditioning system does is it actually removes the heat out of the air in the home and takes it outside. If it's a heat pump, it does just the opposite. It removes the heat from outside and brings it into the home. So there's no change of atmosphere. There's no change of air. It's just it's just removing a certain portion of it and moving it from one side of the wall to the other. Or, for instance, a gas furnace heats up the air, right? It produces heat, which goes into the air. But the air itself does not change. The molecular structure does not change of that air. So, human beings, if you are born a narcissist, you will die a narcissist. Now, the best thing that we could hope for is that a narcissist would become aware. If a narcissist became aware, they cannot change their situation, but they can, through their awareness, learn to control it, learn to um, not create more victims, involve more people into their narcissism. And so, uh, and so I'm going to give some examples out of the book Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess by Dr. Carolyn Leaf. Now, this is an incredible book. I read this book when I was in prison, and I was astounded by this woman's wisdom from a scientific level. I encourage anyone that's listening to my show to get this book, because it really helps you to understand, um, what this how we think, how we function as an individual, which can better help us to understand at a societal level, what's happening with society and all of that. So she discusses, in her book, what is the mind. Um, and she uses the demonstration of a tree, which, of course, um, in Judaism, they have a reference as above, so below. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement because your roots are your leaves, and vice versa. So again, it just kind of shows that there is no changing someone. They are what they are. They can either use what they are for good or they can use what they are for bad. And so that's where we're at with that. But anyway, so there are three types of memories, as she points out. There's informational memories, there's emotional and feeling memories, and then there is physical memories. And I think that this kind of helps demonstrate, um, the multidimensional universe that we live in. The reason is because especially an empath has the ability to take an informational memory and view it from the emotional feeling, side of that memory to the physical side of that memory. And sorry about that, guys. Had to turn on my on the air light. Somebody came into our office over there. Anyways, into our other office. Anyway, so what this means is is there's information in a memory. There's also emotion and feeling attached to that memory, whether it's a positive, um, feeling and emotion, or whether it's a negative feeling or emotion, or whether it's a neutral feeling, or emotion that is tied to that memory. Maybe you neither have a positive nor a negative, emotion. And then, of course, there's the physical memory of it. A lot of people walk into their house and they don't associate the fact that there's a piece of the air conditioner that sits outside that makes their house what they believe cold. An air conditioner, again, does not make your house cold. It removes the heat out of the house, so you're left with nothing but an absence of heat, which feels cold. So again, so there's that physical aspect, right? So a lot of people, they don't even, you know, associate any physical memory with that other than, ooh, it was nice in that guy's house when we went over to our buddy's house, right? They have that nice physical memory of what that felt like in so and so's house. And then, of course, there's the emotional and feeling side of that. Maybe they got emotional because, um, they have lived in Arizona with 115 degrees outside, being homeless, and they got to spend 3 weeks in somebody's house, nice air conditioned home, And so now they have a positive emotion tied to that. They have a a in their unconscious mind, they have um, happiness tied not only to that person, but the feeling that they had in that home. And then, of course, the information side of it, if you understand how the air conditioning works, then you have the information side. If you don't, then you'll have basic information like where the home is located at. You're going to have, who this person is that lets you stay in that home for 3 weeks, right? And so this information can be taken into dimensions. The more memory that we have, and the more consciousness and awareness that we have, it's we continue to elevate dimensions. And if you picture it like a tree, even like Miss Carolyn Leaf here shows a representation of, you get higher up into the tree, the more understanding that you have. The more understanding that you have of how that air conditioner works, but then also of how you felt. Then you have all these other things that tie you to that home, to that experience, and um, to that feeling. And as an empath, most of you all know that, that my dad was very abusive. And so I lived under walking on eggshells. And so I began to associate violence with men. I associated um, manipulative behavior with men. Because I spent 20 years in that childhood, and I didn't see any of that from my mother. And I seen that all from my dad. So by the time I was 21, I already had a complete hate and distrust for all men, which I find very ironic because now I can really see what I was doing. And so again, we revert back to my psychologist when I was in my 20s. He told me he was not worried about me becoming my dad, but he was worried that I would marry my dad. What he seen was that that I had completely grown up in a home with a very sweet and nurturing and loving mother and a very narcissistic and manipulative dad. And of course, I took after my mother. And so, fast forward to who I ended up marrying was someone who manipulated me into a marriage, had a child with me to manipulate and gain control of my finances, and move out a month after we were married because God told her to marry her ex-husband and not me. And so now I find myself, I don't even have to catch myself, I find myself completely neutral when I hear from one party's explanation of their spouse. And that is because I now have informational memories, I have emotional and feeling memories, and I have physical memories of both genders, a male and a female, that were completely narcissistic, that are completely narcissistic, manipulative, and, sociopathic tendencies. And so now I can realize that it's not a gender issue. It is a human condition. And so when I'm talking to someone, I will I will revert and I will say, I'm not going, and I will tell them, I am not going to project based off of what you are telling me as an individual. I'm not going to project what I believe off of listening to just your side of the story. Um, and so that's what creates the fifth dimension, I believe, beings, because we have crossed over to not even listening to solely words, and we're not listening to a specific gender. We want to hear both sides of the story before we even project or assume that we know what the spouse is like. And and of course, I found myself even doing that when I was incarcerated, and people were, a lot of guys were sharing with me, um, oh, that sounds like, my baby mama, or that sounds like my stepmom, or that sounds like, my mom. A lot of them would say that when I would talk about things that my ex did. But what was interesting is when they would tell me that, that their baby mama or their stepmom or whatever, or their stepdad did this or that, when they would bring it up without hearing me speak, then is when I would take notice. But because I hadn't met that other party, I didn't bear any weight. And so when they would ask my opinion, I wouldn't offer. I wouldn't offer a prognosis, a diagnosis of what I believed that they were telling me. And yet, whenever I hear someone speak, in my heart and in my gut, if that's how you want to word it, I automatically know that person, um, as an individual, because I can recognize the patterns, I can recognize the traits, I can recognize all of that. And so I know who they are, but I won't project who they believe that their baby mama or their baby daddy or their, stepmom or stepdad, who they would try and convince me or, state to me, that's who that individual is. And and um, so that's what I believe is so crucial about having complete understanding, not rushing the diagnosis, and also very crucially not projecting onto someone what may or may not be true, especially if you have not met them. And I think that that's critical, because when you project onto someone else, um, what you believe they are without having met them, number one, it's gossip, it's slander, it's all of that. Um, but it's also damaging, because there is a chance that even if that person is a narc, or a manipulator or a psychopath or whatever, that they can become aware. But the more that you try to project a negative connotation onto them, the more they try to cover it up. When in order to improve society as a whole, we need those narcissists to just come out and say, I'm a narcissist and here's what I do, right? And so, and so that's why it's very critical that we don't, you know, it's very crucial, not critical, it's very crucial that we don't um, project a negative connotation onto someone until we have a chance to evaluate them and see if they will recognize it of their own accord and use that information for good. I follow a guy on Facebook, and he is, I can't remember what he calls himself, but it's something like the self aware narcissist or something. And it's very interesting when you listen to him. He has everything right. He is stating all the right things about what narcissists do and how they are not spousal material, they are not marriage material, they are nothing. And so when he's talking, you, I can understand exactly what he's saying, and I recognize everything from from what he is saying based off of what my dad did and then what my ex-wife did. And so then I become aware, and and then he's helping others to become aware. And so he's actually using his negativity for something positive. And so I commend him for that. And with that being said, he, even though he is a negative, he can become a fifth dimensional being himself just by raising awareness. So anyway, that is my show for today. I don't know, I'm kind of on a roll this week, so might come back more later. Not sure. But thank you all for joining me on this show, and I hope this is helpful. As always, please like and share so that we can get this podcast going and get it out to the public, because we need more people to become aware of what's going wrong with society, to help them, to help our children, and to help our children's children. So anyway, thank you and have a wonderful afternoon, y'all. Have a good day.